Well, it's so wonderful to be here with you today. I'm really excited about doing this sermon specifically. I'm very much about the earth and animals and the environment, as most of you know. And so my theme, the sermon that I picked, had to do with the fact that this week was Earth Day. Wednesday was Earth Day, but I think every day is Earth Day. So I would like to start with our biblical witness today, which is from the book of Job. And I am reading you a version from the Inclusive Bible, which is subtitled the First Egalitarian Version. So this is Job chapter 12, verses 1 through 10. Then Job replied, "Oh, I see that you people are the intelligent ones, that wisdom will die when you die. Come on, I have knowledge as well as you, and I'm certainly not your inferior. Who doesn't know these things? I have become a laughingstock to my friends who say, 'He called to God, and did God answer him?' A just and innocent laughingstock. The prosperous, enjoying their ease, think that misfortune is a disgrace, earned and prepared for those whose feet slip. Yet the household of thieves are filled with abundance, and those who provoke God are secure while making God of their violent ways. But turn to the animals and let them teach you. The birds of the air will tell you the truth. Listen to the plants of the earth and learn from them. Let the fish of the sea become your teachers. Who among all of these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In God's hand is the soul of every living thing. In God's hand is the breath of all humankind." The book of Job is part of the Hebrew Bible, or Old Testament, known as the writings. This section of the Bible includes several types of writing: historical works, like chronicles; prayers, as found in Psalms; apocalyptic poetry, as found in parts of Daniel. These writings are called apocalyptic in that a heavenly reality has been revealed to a human being. There's also wisdom literature in books like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. The focus of wisdom literature is to parse out what the adversity, inconsistencies, and absurdities of the human lived condition might mean. The book of Job is a story of human suffering. We hear a lot about the suffering of Job. It's a story of one human being's attempt to understand why bad things keep happening, as well as a continual search for wisdom in the middle of all that. Job is righteous. He's a good person. But by the time we catch up with him in this verse in chapter 12, Job has lost his possessions, his servants, his children, and his health. He's in bad shape. His friends came to comfort him, but pretty soon are trying to convince him that he had sinned. He had to have sinned. That Job's sin was the cause of his suffering, was the only way they could understand sin. Sin was attached to suffering. That was how they saw it. Job and his friends go around and around about this throughout the book of Job. I encourage you to read the book of Job and look for cycles of testimony and response that goes on throughout the book. And these cycles ultimately lead Job to a direct encounter with God. The wisdom tradition tells us that understanding and aligning ourselves with the nature of things leads towards life, towards flourishing. The book of Job is an account of Job's experience in his life, his travails. But this piece of wisdom literature has teachings that also can apply to our lives and help us flourish. In Job 12, 7 through 10, we find just such a teaching, I think. Job's friends claim to have knowledge and wisdom that can save him from his predicament. But Job's reply is that he has greater wisdom. He has learned from the animals. I selected this scripture as a way to think about Earth Day in scriptural terms, maybe in ways that we haven't done before. Earth Day is a special day, is a time to think ecologically, to celebrate creation and intentionally lift up and seek out lessons in our sacred texts that help us to live more responsibly, to live in covenant with the rest of creation, and to do a better job of taking care of the planet and all of its inhabitants. There are a lot of different ways that biblical scholars read the Bible and try to interpret and get at the meanings that are there. I looked at these passages through an ecological lens. By that I mean I'm exploring the scriptures looking for ways that they speak to things like respect for animals, creation care, repairing and preserving the environment, and just equipping ourselves better to do a really good job of caring for all of God's creation. So, what are some of those lessons that are in this verse? One lesson, I think, is that nature and all creatures are inherently good. In Genesis 1:31, we read that God saw everything that God had made, and indeed, it was very good. And throughout the book of Job also, there's this sense of God's delight with God's creation. Another lesson is that God's hand is at work in all things, in all creation, in all of the created world. When we look at this passage from Job, and when we look at the creative world, do we see God's hand at work? Do we look for that? Do we see ourselves as part of creation or as separate from it? Reflection on nature can teach us about God's creative abundance. This just really blows my mind. The sheer number of species on the planet. We share the earth with about 8.7 million other forms of life. The wild and the wonderful ways in which they're made and the ways that they interconnect with each other testify to the vastness and the complexity of the created world, of nature as a whole, and really speak to God's creative exuberance. Consider that from the tiniest little plants that have, poked their heads up this spring, have come through the ground to bring forth new life, from that tiny plant to pods of enormous whales breaching the surface of the ocean as they go to their breeding grounds. All of those things, all 8.7 million of the life forms on earth, testify to the truth of verse 10. In God's hand is the soul of every living thing. Not only is all creation beautiful and extravagantly varied, but it also has wisdom that we can learn from. Our divine beloved gave all of creation, not just us, beauty, wonder, wisdom, and purpose of its own. Purposes that exceed the ways in which we find plants and animals useful for us. All of creation works exactly as our divine beloved has designed it to do. I think there's a lesson in that for all of us. Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh describes it this way: an oak tree is an oak tree. That is all it has to do. If an oak tree is less than an oak tree, then we are all in trouble. Nature as a whole, as well as individual living things, have much to offer humankind in ways of wisdom. Here's a few examples. Wolves can teach us about the two-way strength of the family. Packs are strong because they have individual members who have strength. And the individual members are strong because they live as part of a strong family pack. So it kind of goes both ways. Elephants can teach us to respect and rely on our elders. In African elephant tribes, matriarchs, which are mature female elephants, remain the leaders of the group until they die, often in their 60s and 70s. And the entire tribe of elephants benefits by the fact that they've got this consistent matriarch. Trees also connect in tribes and families, and that's something we don't think about a lot probably. But they are joined under the earth by vast networks of roots that they use. This vast network of roots help from eroding the soil, keeps the soil from eroding down from torrential rains and those kinds of things. And also this network of roots that all intermingle from one tree to another, one tree can actually transmit nutrients to another tree. If one tree has more than it needs, it sends the excess along for the others. So it's kind of a way of supporting each other in times of plenty and in times of challenge. Hermann Hesse wrote, "For me, trees have always been the most penetrating creatures. I revere them when they live in tribes and families, in forests and groves. And even more I revere them when they stand alone. Nothing is more exemplary than a beautiful, strong tree. A tree says, 'My strength is trust. I trust that God is in me. Out of this trust, I live.'" Companion animals can teach us about empathy and compassion. Anyone who has had a long-time pet knows that animals can be unbelievably attuned to our physical and emotional states. Sometimes people can be kind of clueless. As an example of that, there was one time I was on a plane. Getting on a plane at Midway Airport, got in the center seat, which is where I was assigned. And as I sat down and, fastened my seatbelt, did all those things, the weight of the reason I was on the plane just hit me like a ton of bricks. I had boarded this plane to go to California for my grandson's funeral. And I was so busy with all the prep, but when I sat in the seat and I was buckled in, then it all just was like, and I started to cry. There was someone on either side of me, people I didn't know. No one ever said a word. "Are you okay?" Hand on the arm, offer me a Kleenex, nothing. I can't help but think that if a dog or cat had been in one of my seatmates, they'd have been all over me, they'd have, comforted me in some way. They'd have got that something's not good here and I want to make you happy. So I just think that they experience us differently than we experience each other sometimes. Animals enjoy friendships with others like themselves and with others who are vastly different. Like I showed the video to the kids that showed all these different animals frolicking around together. If it's a commercial you haven't seen, it's a commercial for Android, and if you look for it on YouTube, you'll find it. I think it's called Animal Friends. And the animals, they don't teach their lessons through human speech. That would be easy for us to get what they're saying, right? But we need to watch them interact with each other, watch them interact with the natural world, and discern what teachings might be there for us. It's the very wildness of animals that make them spiritually significant. They live fully as the beings they were created to be, and no one has persuaded them to do otherwise. Now, asking the animals may seem like a weird or difficult thing in this modern world. It might seem awkward. Maybe we're more inclined to ask Siri, I don't know. But reflection on nature has the power to call us home to the God who created us and created all things and pronounced them very good.